industry or something to do with the company, it'll ask you to fill out a further questionnaire. If there is none, you're ready to go ahead and entertain or enter into any of the RFQs that you'll be invited to. Can we go to the next slide? So monitoring, responding to tenders. Like I said, we register on the Procure system. Once you've registered, we'll invite you to the bids. On that, you'll have one point of contact for every person or for every package, kind of help streamline the RFIs back and forth and any clarifications that may happen. These are all be anonymized. So questions that come back, if they're not, if they're related to the entire procurement process, they will go to everybody. If they're specific, then we manage it accordingly. But it's the same information. So once the procurement process the tendering process has been completed, you will have to submit your bids online. We are available at any time if you want to have screen sharing or a Teams meeting where you want to help navigate the system. We're absolutely able to help you do that. Once your bid's in, it's closed, it's sealed. We can't see it until the bid closes. And at that point, we have to go in and open them all at the same time. Allows fairness and transparency to everybody. At that point, we will start evaluation and a clarification process. We'll go through the bids, we'll establish any questions that it may be, and we'll reach out through that system. In that system, you can put up multiple users to get the answers back, so anybody can see them and answer them accordingly. From there, we create our recommendation. We will be negotiating the terms and conditions, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Whereas we then submit to the client for a final review and approval before we go ahead and award the contract. And if there's any questions on that later, we can go through it. So we go to the next slide. So what are the real requirements to be able to be on this job? One of the most important things is the Metrolinx's DMCA requirements. All subcontractors will have to abide by the requirements of the job that are in the master agreement. There are certain flow downs that will come down. I want to make sure people are aware of this because although the contract will be between TGP and the subcontractors, we do have requirements from the main contract that flow down, and I don't want it to be a surprise to anybody when those are presented. The other thing, as Dave talked about safety earlier, is very important. Being core certified and signed up to ISN is going to be a requirement, as well as following TGP's health and safety policies. On top of that is the environmental quality and safety requirements we'll have, and the union requirements that we'll have on this job, such as IUNA and so forth. We go to the next slide. From a timeline perspective, so we're in 2025 right now. We're just going through two tranches of design. Once that design's finalized for the North stations, we'll be going to market approximately the end of August, beginning of September, and then going through the procurement process. Shortly after that will be the Southern stations, and we'll go to market for those after that as well. So it's a high-level schedule. That's where we're looking at. Next slide. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Liebe.
Thank you, Sandeep, for the introduction. I'll go through essentially the conclusion of the presentation here, which is going to walk us through the station's procurement pipeline as well as a bit of community benefits. So, for me personally, I'm extremely excited and honored to be part of such a big transformation in the GTA related to urban transit. This is huge, right? When it's built, it's really going to take a lot of cars off the road and relieve Line 1. So I'm hoping that everybody's as excited as I am to be part of this historic transformation. Back earlier in the year, just a bit of background, we tendered the Guideway, right? So that's 3 kilometers of elevated Guideway. And what that consists of is essentially the site prep, the earthworks, the foundation piles, the piers, the substructure, the superstructure, the segmental precast, and the launching gantry and associated works. We've now settled more or less on preferred proponents, and we're just going through some design updates. So now we're in this next phase, which is essentially 5 stations and the 2 emergency exit buildings. And I'll walk through that. So the first tranche that we have is what I call enablement on the stations. And by the way, as you've heard in the video earlier, there's 5 stations. Right now, what you see there is Don Valley Station, which once was called Ontario Science Center. I thought it'd be interesting to kind of share with you the cross section. But essentially, this is a lot of enablement works we're talking about. So that would be, again, some site prep, some excavation. We also have the foundation piles for the stations, as well as the actual foundations on some of the stations, which is the formwork, the rebar, the concrete. We also have the actual substructure and superstructure at the stations. And we're also going to do some of the, we're going to do the elevators and escalators as well, the procurement of those. So that is coming out in Q3. In fact, some of them are starting to be released now. We're timing the rest with 100% design readiness, and that should all be released to market at some point in Q3. If we go to the next slide, please. Don Valley Station, very, very nice looking station. This is essentially the exterior shell of the building. Of course, stations. So what I'm mentioning here would be multiplied by 5, but essentially we're talking about, you know, some the site preps, again, the excavation. We're going to have some of the noise barrier walls there, and everything that you see there would include the masonry, the glazing, the roofing, the landscaping, the hardscapes, the plants, the trees. So there's some signage out there. The structural steel will also be needed. So there's quite a number of packages that we're getting ready for, and that'll be released in Q3/Q4 timeframe. And if we go to the next slide, please. This is the interior of, and you can see, you know, it looks really nice. A lot of nice finishes there. So we're talking about anything to do with flooring, tiling, the drywall, the ceilings, the lighting, the electrical, the mechanicals, the wayfinding, the signage that you see there as well, and all the mechanical, electrical works. So that will be coming out approximately Q4 2025. Okay, and then that really concludes, you know, the major procurement that we have for this project. If we go to the next slide, please. The 2 emergency exit buildings, this here's the Millwood one. It could change, but this is what we see at this point. Again, I'm not going to go through all the packages, but very similar to the buildings, the stations that I talked about, the packages are listed there. And we're going to have to basically tender those out as well. Of course, as Dave said, we will share a copy of the presentation to the audience after the venue is completed, and then you'll have the list. Next slide, please. So community benefits and vendor diversity. So this strikes a note for me. And interestingly enough, when I first came in today, I went to the Access employment desk, and I met Helena there, who runs Access. And, you know, she started telling me the story about the newcomers and how challenging it is for them to find jobs. And I said, look, I can relate to that. And I promised her that I will give a bit of a personal story during this presentation, and this is what I'll do. And it connects back to this. So my personal story is this. You know, my family, and what I mean by that is my late parents and myself, my brothers and my sisters, we all immigrated to Canada halfway around the world. Okay. Has anybody heard of a place called Almont, Ontario? I typically get that nobody knows, but it is a small town, 4,000 people in the Ottawa Valley. If you're a basketball fan, the inventor of basketball is Dr. James Naismith. He was born there. So that's really the most famous thing I could say about Almont. But literally when we got there, we didn't know a soul in sight, right? didn't know a soul in sight. The only people we knew were the two families that sponsored us. Okay. And I guess who has relocated to a new country? Has anybody in the audience that relocated to a new country? See a few here. Yes. I'm sure you can relate then, because when you relocate to a new country, there's challenges, right? There's challenges. It's also exciting, but you got to learn the culture. You got to integrate into the culture, and there's new foods and that sort of stuff. So we were lucky enough to be provided a small apartment to settle in. And the first week we were there, we were settling it in, right? And a couple of funny things that pop into mind. Our first dinner, of course, my mom cooks spaghetti noodles, and of course, where we came from, what do we eat it with? Soy sauce. No idea that pasta sauce even existed, right? She bought a bag of milk, and like, strange, milk comes in bags. How do we even access the milk? Do we cut it at the corner? Do we cut it at the top? Say, let's cut it at the top. So she cuts it at the top. She pours the milk to each one of us, and there's half a bag left. How do you store this thing? So we had an elastic band. She tied it up and put it in the fridge. My first sandwich for school, she made me a butter slice sandwich. She thought butter bricks was cheese. So I was eating that for months until somebody told me, dude, have you checked your cholesterol level yet? That's butter you're eating. So these are the kind of nuances that basically we went through, right? But what I can say, and the key thing I want to say here is the challenge, the big challenge that we had. And I remember my dad and my mom at the dinner table, this is a regular discussion that we had, was really how my dad said, look, how am I going to find a job to feed my family, right? How do I do that? I don't know English very well. I'm learning. I have a lot to offer, but I don't know anybody. And that was a recurring discussion week over week. The big thing for us, though, I think the breaking point, though, the breakthrough was that the sponsors, they introduced us to the local community. They introduced us to friends, business owners. They invited us to events similar to these things. And that's how we started developing relationships with all these folks. And over the course of time, my father and mother started getting small jobs. But about 6 months after we moved, my dad finally found a full-time job at a manufacturing plant. And then shortly after, my mother found a job, full-time job. So I didn't really recognize the importance of the sponsors at that point in time and the introductions to the community until later on. But that to me was crucial. And the way I can relate it to this is that, look, I see TGP Procurement as a sponsor, right? Just as those folks gave us those opportunities. Of course, you can bring a horse to water, but the horse has to drink the water. And of course, it's a it's a two-way street here. So my family took full advantage of the relationships, and that's how we got started. So TGP Procurement, I'd like to, introduce the local suppliers, for example, the women-owned companies, the indigenous companies, social enterprises, et cetera. It's important that we introduce you to our subcontractors that have actually been awarded through competitive procurement, have been awarded the works and doing a lot of the works on the Guideway. I like to be able to open the doors to the local community so that they develop those relationships, just very much like the way that my parents did in Almont. Hopefully you get the contacts, the relationships, and then some work can come out of it, right? So that is a big thing for us here in terms of, engaging with the community. Certainly we're participating in these events, right? And just channeling opportunities and making sure the understands where the opportunities are. We also, for applicable scopes, invite bidders that are local, indigenous, to any applicable scopes that may arise. And then, as I mentioned, look, we ask our bidders for the big work that when they submit their tenders to provide proposals to help us move the needle on vendor diversity, apprenticeships, community benefits. And that is then, once we execute the contract, we manage these folks and make sure that the progress is happening. And, here today, the booths in the other room, some of those subcontractors are there. So I highly encourage anyone that's interested, please go visit them, get that relationship, get that contact, and make it happen, right? So with that said, I hope I got the point across for community benefits and vendor engagement, because it really hits me personally as well in my past. We have the one-on-one sessions as well later on. And we do have some slots open, and if any of the companies are interested, by all means, reach out to Lorena. We can arrange a slot. If there's no room today, we're definitely available anytime thereafter to answer any questions or concerns that you may have. And finally speaking, I just hope everybody enjoyed the presentation. Hope everybody gets excited about the opportunities that we have. And then I'll pass it over to Dave to get us introduced to the Q&A session. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all. That was great. We are going to open up to questions. If anybody's got a question. Yeah, Lorena's got a couple that came in earlier.
There was a few that we got online, so we'll just start off with those, warm everybody up. One question, which I think was already answered, but could be reiterated. General information in regard to the procurement process with TGP, particularly the PO purchase process. So maybe this is good for Sandeep.
Sure. Yeah, as I mentioned, one of the first things we need you to do is register on the Procure system. What I didn't reiterate earlier is for you to be able to get paid, we need you registered on there anyways. So if we need to create a PO, you'll have to be on there. Other than that, what I do recommend is that email address that's on there, it is monitored. So if you have anything you want to put forward or have any products, services, etc., by all means, reach out through there and we'll do our best to get back to you right away.
I have another one lined up for Lee this time. Given the new climate with tariffs being imposed, is there a made in Canada preference or requirement?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Every day the situation is quite fluid, as everybody knows, right? And we basically got to be agile enough to adapt to it. We also pay very close attention to the government and the client in terms of what direction they would like us to take as well. So that plays into it. In terms of buy local and buy in Canada, that's extremely important as well. We encourage that for sure. And for applicable packages, we do ask our bidders to provide, origin of significant or of the materials that it's coming from. In some cases, some of the suppliers are taking some proactive approaches in terms of speaking with the local government to try to get exemptions, right? So I've seen that happen as well. But we certainly do encourage the local and buy Canada. And once we get into a negotiation phase, we will be, looking to get the details behind it and essentially lock that into the contract. And another thing in terms of tariffs, the way we can avoid it too is sometimes we've actually cut purchase orders early. If the design is mature enough, we will cut a purchase order to procure the materials ahead of time. So that way we get rid of that variable, right? So.
We had a question on Zoom. One of the participants was wondering how vendors who are joining us on Zoom can meet with the procurement team.
Again, yeah, it's unfortunately we can't see you in person, but we can definitely set up a time. That procurement email is the best way to get a hold of us. Just make sure you provide your complete information. And we'll definitely set up a meeting either at one of the offices or through a virtual Teams.
I'm just going to hand you the mic so people on, or Abigail's got one over here, so people online can hear.
I want to make sure I understood correctly that the north stations, so for example, for elevator and escalator, will tender before the south stations because they're two different design levels of progress. Is that correct?
I could take a crack at this one. Yeah, great question. Thanks. So we're looking right now to tender the complete package of escalators and elevators for all of the Ontario Line North elevated guideway section. Hopefully that answers your question.
Would the stations be procured individually or some as a package?
So we're currently looking at the strategy on how the stations are going to be procured, but the stations will be procured individually. It's what the level of trades that we drop down to that's currently under negotiation at the minute. And as we get that further information, we'll feed it out to the market.
In some of the more recent Metrolinx projects, they're using more of an alliance model where the project co is not sharing access to the project agreement, like the output specifications that Metrolinx provides to the joint venture. We're only being given design level specifications below that. But then for some of the older Metrolinx contracts, full access to the project agreements provided for the subcontractors. So I'm curious if this project is using what I'm seeing in more of the newer projects, or will access to the project agreement be provided for all subcontractors?
Take a stab at this one. So the design will encompass anything and everything that is needed in terms of specification, which it will be in the specification in the tender as well as the drawings of the buildings, etc. So anything that's relevant will be included in the specification. Now, we also have a link to what we call the DMCA, and that's available to the public. But what will happen as well is what I call Schedule 15, that's all the output specs, as you probably aware of. Of those where it's relevant to the scope, and in this case might be elevators, escalators, we will take excerpts of the relevant specs out of the output specs and provide that into the tender as well. And in terms of, interface documents or interface agreements, I'm used to seeing that as well, which is spare parts requirements, reliability. Any of that information will also be included in the tender.
No, it's for people online.
Good morning. My name is Shahryar. Just asking about these tariffs that is around copper, aluminum, and steel, and you're going to be using a lot of wires and cables for the development of these stations. And copper is usually calculated by today's price, and escalation can happen, and it's almost certain that it will. How much of that risk have you allowed in your contract base?
It's a great question. So it'll be a case-by-case basis, Sherry. Like one of the things I can give an example of is structural steel, right, for the buildings. So we had some interesting meetings with suppliers and subcontractors about it. And really, in that category, there's going to be a bunch of product that actually comes from Canada. So then, you don't have to worry about it. There's going to be a subset, I think, the rolled welded wide flange product, the majority of that's coming from the US. So that could become a retaliatory tariff product. Now, what some of our suppliers have done, they do have mitigation plans for that. Some of that could be, they have distribution channels that do house that product, and hence you could potentially go and get away from the tariffs, but you pay a little bit more, but not as much to the amount of the tariff percentages, right? So there's distribution channels that people can check. At the same time, you know, there's European suppliers that product can come from. Of course, you got to weigh that out against lead time. Can that make it on time? You also got to weigh out your sustainability and environmental requirements. There's a tension there. So every category will have its own type of storyline, and how do we make sure we play it correctly and minimize any impacts to sustainability, environmental, and we're going to bring carrying that overseas, right? So there's different ways to play it. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that. Great question.
I'm not seeing any hands. Is there anything online? Okay. Without any questions, Lee mentioned that we do have offer one-on-one meetings with the procurement team. So if you haven't signed up, you can talk to Lorena, who's going to wave right now. We have some slots. We're going to do those meetings here. If it's not convenient, you can contact this email and they'll set up another meeting for you. Happy to keep those doors open and those conversations going. Craig, I don't know if you have any closing comments. Sorry to put you on the spot, but it looks like we're wrapped here.
No, again, I just want to reiterate, thank you for everybody for coming. We do appreciate it. We know everybody's busy. I was going to give a speech for the closing remarks, but we're advised to make it quick so that everybody can get out and speak to the vendors and start the one-on-ones. So again, thank you. And if you need anything, we'll be about all day. Just come and pull us to one side.
As you know, Ontario government closed Ontario Science Center. No more Ontario Science Center. But your map, your all the instructions showing that Ontario Science Center station. So it's not related to you, but as you know, in future, Ontario Science Center will be a hospital, will be a community center, or is this area in future, what will be on this space using for another purpose, or buildings or any commercial area, as you know, just for.
So I'll do a stab at that, but the short answer is we don't know. That, you know, that property is not ours. Our elevated guideway will run in front of it, close to the roadway, but we don't have any insight into the future uses of any of that land.